The Forbidden Curiosity. In the gleaming spires of Zarthon Prime, capital world of the Zarthon Imperium, life moved with clockwork precision. The air hummed with the sound of advanced technology, a testament to the Zarthon's superiority of the lesser races that populated the galaxy. Among these towering structures of crystal and metal, one stood out, the Central Command Tower, home to High Commander Vexa and his family. Vexa stood at the panoramic window of his office, his 4 eyes narrowed as he surveyed the city below. His scaled skin shimmered with a metallic sheen, a mark of his high status among his people. As he watched the orderly lines of hovercars and the bustling Zarthons going about their daily routines, a frown creased his angular features. "Something troubles you, my love." The soft voice of his mate Zila broke through his contemplation. Vexa turned, his frown deepening as he met Zila's concerned gaze. "It's Lyra," he said, his voice a low rumble. "I fear our daughter is straying from the path." Zila's luminescent eyes widened slightly, her own scaled skin rippling with concern. "Surely not. She's always been a model of Zarthon virtue." Vexa shook his head, moving to his desk and activating a holographic display. "Look at this," he said, gesturing to the flickering images. Her recent academic records show an alarming interest in primitive technologies. The holograms displayed schematics of crude machines, engines that relied on combustion rather than the clean quantum drives the Zarthons had perfected centuries ago. Zila gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. But why would she study such things?" Zila asked, her voice trembling. Vexa's jaw clenched. "I don't know, but I intend to find out." Meanwhile, deep beneath the gleaming towers of Zarthon Prime, in a forgotten sub-level of the ancient archives, Lyra worked feverishly. Her slender fingers flew over an old console, decrypting files that hadn't been accessed in generations. Her luminescent eyes, so like her mother's, were wide with excitement as she pored over schematics and diagrams of technologies long abandoned by her people. "Fascinating," she muttered to herself, her voice barely above a whisper in the dusty silence of the archives. "The ingenuity, the resourcefulness. How could we have dismissed this so easily?" The "this" she referred to as human technology. While the Zarthons had long since mastered quantum mechanics and zero-point energy, relegating combustion engines and analog circuits to the dustbin of history, Lyra found herself captivated by the clever solutions humans had devised with their limited resources. A sound from the entrance to the archives made Lyra jump. Quickly, she shut down the console and gathered her notes, stuffing them into a hidden compartment in her uniform. She had just managed to compose herself when Tarek, her father's aide, rounded the corner. "Lady Lyra," Tarek said, his tone formal, but with an underlying note of suspicion. "Your father requests your presence immediately." Lyra nodded, her heart racing, but her face a mask of calm. "Of course, Tarek. I'll be there shortly." As she followed Tarek out of the archives, Lyra's mind whirled. Had her father discovered her secret studies? The thought sent a chill down her spine. The Zarthon Imperium prided itself on its technological superiority, and interest in primitive tech was seen as not just strange, but potentially seditious. The ride up to her father's office in the gravity lift was tense and silent. Lyra could feel Tarek's eyes on her, watching for any sign of nervousness or guilt. She kept her gaze forward, her posture perfect, every inch the daughter of the High Commander. When the door slid open, revealing her father's office, Lyra stepped out with practiced grace. Vexa stood by the window, his back to her, while her mother sat in a nearby chair, her expression worried. "Father," Lyra said, bowing her head slightly. "You wished to see me?" Vexa turned, his 4 eyes fixing on her with an intensity that made Lyra want to shrink back. But she held her ground, meeting his gaze steadily. "Lyra," Vexa began, his voice low and controlled, "I've been reviewing your recent academic pursuits. Would you care to explain your unusual choice of subjects?" Lyra's mind raced. She had known this moment might come, But now that it was here, she found herself at a loss for words. How could she explain her fascination with human ingenuity to a father who saw them as little more than clever animals? I believe there's value in understanding all forms of technology, Father, she said carefully. Even those we've moved beyond. It gives us perspective on our own advancements. Vex's eyes narrowed. Perspective? Lyra, we are Zarthans. We have no need for the primitive scratchings of lesser species. Our technology is the pinnacle of galactic achievement. But Father, Lyra protested, her passion overriding her caution. The humans have achieved so much with so little. Their resourcefulness, their ability to adapt and overcome. Surely there's something we can learn from that. The moment the words left her mouth, Lyra knew she had said too much. Vex's expression hardened, and even her mother looked shocked. Learn from humans. Vex's voice was cold with anger and disappointment. Lyra, I had hoped this was merely a passing curiosity, but I see now it's something far more dangerous. You will cease these misguided studies immediately. Am I understood? Lyra wanted to argue, to make her father see the value in what she had discovered, but the look in his eyes told her it would be futile. With a heavy heart, she nodded. Yes, Father, I understand. Good, Vexa said, turning back to the window. You're dismissed. As Lyra left the office, her mind was in turmoil. She had known her interest in human technology was forbidden, but hearing her father's words, seeing the disappointment in his eyes, drove home just how serious the situation was. And yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was onto something important, something that could change everything. Back in her quarters, Lyra paced restlessly. She knew she should obey her father, knew that continuing her studies could have serious consequences. But the thought of abandoning her research, of never uncovering the secrets hidden in those ancient files, was unbearable. With a determined set to her jaw, Lyra made her decision. She would continue her research, but she would have to be more careful. No more late nights in the archives, no more accessing restricted files from public terminals. She would find a way to pursue her passion in secret, away from the watchful eyes of her father and the Zarthan authorities. As she began to plan, Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that she was setting foot on a path that would change not just her life, but the fate of the entire Zarthon Imperium. Little did she know just how right she was, or how soon her world would be turned upside down by the very knowledge she sought. A daughter's defiance. The weeks following her confrontation with her father were tense for Lyra. She felt eyes on her constantly, watching her every move. Tarek seemed to materialize around every corner, his gaze probing and suspicious. Even her mother, usually a source of comfort, now regarded her with a mixture of concern and disappointment that cut Lyra to the core. But despite the increased scrutiny, Lyra refused to abandon her pursuits. If anything, her father's reaction had only intensified her curiosity. What was it about human technology that frightened the Zarthan leadership so much? There had to be more to it than mere pride in their own advancements. Late one night, when the gleaming towers of Zarthan Prime were bathed in the soft glow of its 3 moons, Lyra slipped out of her quarters. She had spent weeks planning this excursion, carefully mapping out the blind spots in the city's surveillance systems. With a small pack of equipment slung over her shoulder, she made her way to the outskirts of the capital, where the pristine buildings gave way to older, forgotten structures. Her destination was an abandoned research facility shut down decades ago, when the Zarthans had made the leap to quantum technology. If there were answers to be found, Lyra was certain they would be here. The facility loomed before her, a dark silhouette against the starry sky. Lyra's heart pounded as she approached, her every sense alert for any sign of security measures or alarms. But the place seemed truly abandoned, left to rust and decay, while the rest of Zarthan society moved ever forward. Using an old access code she had uncovered in her research, Lyra managed to bypass the facility's long-dormant security systems. The doors creaked open, revealing a cavernous space filled with dust-covered equipment and dimly glowing emergency lights. Incredible, Lyra breathed, her eyes wide as she took in the scene. Row upon row of ancient computers lined the walls, their screens dark and silent. In the center of the room stood what could only be a partially disassembled human spacecraft, its hull pitted and scarred. Lyra approached the ship with reverence, her fingers tracing the unfamiliar contours of its design. It was so different from the sleek, almost organic shapes of Zarfan vessels. This ship spoke of a different philosophy altogether, one of utility over aesthetics, of making do with limited resources. As she examined the ship, Lyra's mind raced with questions. How had this human vessel come to be here? And why had it been hidden away, rather than studied openly? The official histories spoke of first contact with humans as a relatively recent event, but this ship looked far older than that. Pushing her questions aside for the moment, Lyra set to work. She had brought diagnostic tools with her, cleverly disguised as standard Zarfan equipment. Now, she began the painstaking process of interfacing these tools with the human technology, trying to coax life back into the dormant systems. Hours passed as Lyra worked, her excitement growing with each small victory. Slowly but surely, she began to understand the logic behind the human designs. It was different from Zarfan technology, yes, but no less elegant in its own way. Where Zarfan tech relied on complex quantum interactions, human technology made clever use of simpler principles, combining them in ways that often achieved similar results. As the first rays of dawn began to creep through the facility's grimy windows, Lyra made a breakthrough. With a soft hum, the ship's main computer came to life, its screens flickering with alien symbols. Lyra's heart raced as she began to decipher the information before her. What she found made her blood run cold. The ship's logs told a story very different from the one she had been taught. This vessel hadn't been some chance discovery, a relic of a primitive race encountered by the advanced Zarthans. No, this ship had been part of a human exploration fleet, one that had made contact with the Zarthans centuries ago, long before the official histories claimed. And the Zarthans had attacked them. Lyra staggered back from the console, her mind reeling. It couldn't be true. The Zarfan Imperium prided itself on its peaceful expansion, on its policy of uplifting less advanced races. They weren't conquerors or warmongers, were they? But the evidence was right there in front of her. The ship's logs detailed a peaceful first contact gone horribly wrong. The humans had approached with open hands, seeking friendship and cultural exchange. The Zarthans of that era, fearful of the potential threat posed by another spacefaring race, had responded with violence. The human fleet had been decimated, their technology seized and studied in secret, and then erased, not just from Zarfan history, but from the memories of the Zarfan people themselves. Generations of lies and misdirection, all to maintain the illusion of Zarfan's superiority and benevolence. Lyra felt sick. Her whole life, everything she had been taught about her people's history and their place in the galaxy, was built on a foundation of deception, and her own father, as High Commander, must be complicit in maintaining this lie. A noise from outside the facility snapped Lyra back to the present. Dawn had broken, and she had stayed far too long. Quickly, she downloaded as much data as she could onto a portable device, then shut down the ship's systems. As she erased all traces of her presence, Lyra's mind raced with the implications of what she had discovered. She couldn't keep this secret. The truth had to come out, no matter the cost. But how? Who could she trust with information that could shake the very foundations of Zarfan society? As Lyra slipped out of the facility and made her way back towards the heart of the city, she knew one thing for certain: her life would never be the same again. She had set foot on a path that would either change everything or destroy her. The familiar spires of Zarfan Prime loomed before her, no longer symbols of progress and enlightenment, but monuments to a lie that had spanned centuries. Lyra squared her shoulders, the weight of her newfound knowledge heavy upon her. She had wanted to understand human ingenuity, to learn from their resourcefulness. Instead, she had uncovered a truth that threatened everything she had ever known. As she walked through the awakening city, Lyra knew that her next steps would determine not just her own fate, but potentially the fate of two civilizations. The daughter of the High Commander, keeper of a secret that could ignite a galactic firestorm, disappeared into the mourning crowd, her mind ablaze with plans and possibilities. The die was cast, there was no turning back now. The human connection. The following days were a blur for Lyra. She went through the motions of her daily life, attending functions, participating in discussions about Zartham's superiority, but her mind was elsewhere. The weight of her discovery pressed down on her, making each smile feel like a betrayal, each nod of agreement a lie. She knew she couldn't keep this to herself, but who could she trust? The enormity of the secret she carried was overwhelming. It wasn't just about correcting a historical inaccuracy, it was about confronting the very foundation of Zartham's society. As she pondered her next move, fate intervened in an unexpected way. It was during a routine diplomatic function, a gathering of Zartham elite to welcome representatives from various subjugated species. Lyra stood by her father's side, the perfect image of a dutiful daughter, when she first saw him. He was part of the human delegation, a young man with curious eyes that seemed to take in everything around him. Unlike the other representatives who seemed awed or intimidated by the Zartham's technological displays, this human appeared, intrigued. Their eyes met across the crowded room, and Lyra felt a jolt of recognition. Here was someone who might understand, someone who might help. As the evening wore on, Lyra managed to maneuver herself closer to the human delegation. She caught snippets of their conversation, noting with interest the young man's insightful questions about Zartham technology. Finally, she saw her opportunity. As the human stepped away from his group, Lyra approached him. "Fascinating, isn't it?" she said, gesturing to a nearby quantum computer display. "But I wonder, have you ever considered how it compares to more traditional computing methods?" The human's eyes widened slightly, surprise and interest flickering across his face. "I have actually," he replied cautiously, "though I wouldn't have expected a Zartham to be interested in such outdated technology." Lyra smiled, her hearts racing. "I'm Lyra," she said, omitting her full title. "And you are?" "Alex," the human replied. "Alex Chen. I'm here as a technical advisor to the human delegation." They fell into conversation, Lyra carefully steering it towards topics of technology and history. Alex proved to be knowledgeable and quick-witted, matching Lyra's subtle probes with equally careful responses. As they talked, Lyra became increasingly certain that Alex was more than he appeared. The way he spoke, the questions he asked, he seemed to be fishing for information just as much as she was. The conversation was cut short by the approach of Tarek, his eyes narrow with suspicion. "Lady Lyra," he said, emphasizing her title, "your father requests your presence." Lyra nodded, turning back to Alex. "It was a pleasure speaking with you, Alex. Perhaps we'll have a chance to continue our discussion later." Alex bowed slightly, a glimmer of understanding in his eyes. "I look forward to it, Lady Lyra." As Lyra walked away, her mind was racing. She had made contact, planted the seeds of a potential alliance, but how to proceed without arousing suspicion? The answer came to her that night, as she lay awake in her quarters. The diplomatic summit would last for several more days. If she could arrange another meeting with Alex, away from prying eyes. The next day, Lyra put her plan into action. Using her status as the High Commander's daughter, she arranged a cultural exchange, a tour of some of Zartham Prime's historical sites for a select group of delegates. Naturally, she made sure Alex was among them. As they moved through the ancient corridors of the First Temple of Quantum Enlightenment, Lyra managed to fall back from the main group, Alex at her side. "I suspect," she said quietly, "that we both have questions we'd like to ask away from official channels." Alex nodded, his expression guarded but curious. "I had that impression, yes. But why me? Why take this risk?" Lyra took a deep breath. This was it, the point of no return. "Because I've discovered something," she whispered. "Something that changes everything we thought we knew about the relationship between our peoples." She quickly outlined what she had found in the abandoned research facility, watching as Alex's expression shifted from skepticism to shock to a grim sort of understanding. "I knew it," he muttered. "We had suspicions for years, but no proof. Lyra, do you understand what this means?" Lyra nodded, her face pale. "It means that everything, the subjugation of other species, the Zarthan claim to benevolent leadership, it's all built on a lie." "Not just that," Alex said, his voice low and urgent. "It means that humanity has been denied its rightful place in the galaxy for centuries. We've been kept down, our potential stunted, because your people feared what we might become." The weight of it all crashed down on Lyra and you. It wasn't just about correcting history. It was about righting a monumental wrong, one that had shaped the fate of entire civilizations. "We need to expose this," Lyra said, her voice filled with determination. "But I can't do it alone. I need your help, Alex." Alex studied her for a long moment, as if trying to gauge her sincerity. Finally, he nodded. "All right, but we'll need to be careful. If what you're saying is true, the stakes couldn't be higher." Over the next few days, Lyra and Alex met in secret, piecing together a plan. Alex, it turned out, was more than just a technical advisor. He was part of a human group dedicated to uncovering the truth about their species' history and reclaiming their technological heritage. Together, they plotted to access the central Zarthan archives, where Lyra believed the full truth of the first contact incident would be stored. It was a daring plan, fraught with danger. If they were caught, Lyra would be branded a traitor, and Alex, well, his fate didn't bear thinking about. As the day of the attempt approached, Lyra found herself filled with a mixture of terror and exhilaration. She was about to betray everything she had ever known, to turn her back on her people and her family. But she was also on the verge of uncovering a truth that could reshape the galaxy. The night before the planned break-in, Lyra stood at the window of her quarters, looking out over the glittering expanse of Zarthan Prime. The city seemed different to her now, its beauty tarnished by the knowledge of the lies that underpinned it. A soft chime from her communication device broke through her reverie. It was a message from Alex, confirming the final details of their plan. As she read it, a chill ran down Lyra's spine. At the end of the message was a phrase that made her blood run cold. "Operation Phoenix is go." Phoenix, the mythical bird that rose from its own ashes. Was that what they were about to do? Burn down the old order so that something new could rise in its place? Lyra took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. In a few short hours, she would take the final step on the path she had started down when she first became curious about human technology. There would be no going back. The fate of 2 civilizations, and perhaps the entire galaxy, hung in the balance. And Lyra, the daughter of the High Commander, the Zarthan who dared to question, was at the center of it all. As the suns of Zarthan Prime set, casting long shadows across the city, Lyra prepared herself for the most important night of her life. Whatever happened next, the galaxy would never be the same again. Unveiling the truth. The night air was cool against Lyra's skin as she made her way through the shadowy streets of Zarthan Prime. The city's nighttime glow, usually a source of comfort, now felt oppressive, each light a potential betrayer of her clandestine movement. She moved with purpose, her steps quick but measured, careful not to draw attention. Her destination loomed ahead. The Central Archives, a towering structure of crystal and metal that housed the collective knowledge of the Zarthan Imperium. Somewhere within its walls lay the truth she sought, the key to unraveling centuries of deception. As she approached the building, a figure detached itself from the shadows. Lyra's hand instinctively went to the concealed energy pistol at her hip, but she relaxed as she recognized Alex's features in the dim light. "Ready?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lyra nodded, trying to ignore the rapid beating of her heart. "As I'll ever be." Together, they approached the archive's service entrance. This was where Lyra's status as the High Commander's daughter would prove crucial. She placed her hand on the bioscanner, holding her breath as it hummed to life. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a soft chime, the door slid open. "We're in," Lyra breathed, relief washing over her. "But we need to move quickly. My access will trigger a notification to security. We have maybe 20 minutes before they realize something's amiss." Alex nodded, his face grim with determination. They slipped inside, the door closing silently behind them. The interior of the archives was a maze of data crystals and holographic interfaces, each containing millennia of Zarthan knowledge. But Lyra knew where they needed to go. She led Alex through the winding corridors, deeper into the heart of the building. "Here," she said at last, stopping before an unmarked door. "This is a restricted section. The true history of our people, the parts deemed too sensitive for public knowledge, should be in here." Once again, Lyra placed her hand on the scanner. This time, however, the system beeped in denial. "Damn," Lyra muttered. "I was afraid of this. My clearance doesn't extend this far." Alex stepped forward, pulling a small device from his pocket. "Let me try something," he said, attaching the device to the security panel. Lyra watched in amazement as lines of code flickered across the device's screen. Within moments, the door slid open with a soft hiss. "Human ingenuity," Alex said with a wry smile. "Sometimes the old ways are the best." They entered the restricted section, and Lyra felt a shiver run down her spine. This room felt different, heavy with the weight of hidden truths. Row upon row of data crystals lined the walls, each potentially containing the answers they sought. "We need to find records from about 3 centuries ago," Lyra said, moving to one of the access terminals. "Anything related to first contact with humanity." They worked quickly, sifting through decades of information. The minutes ticked by, each passing moment increasing the risk of discovery. Just as Lyra was beginning to lose hope, Alex called out. "I think I found something," he said, his voice tense with excitement. Lyra rushed to his side, her eyes widening as she saw the information displayed on the screen. It was a classified report detailing the Zarthan's first encounter with human explorers. As they read, the full extent of the deception became clear. The humans had indeed come in peace, seeking alliance and mutual understanding. But the Zarthan leadership of the time, fearful of potential competition, had chosen aggression. The report detailed how the human fleet had been decimated, their technology seized and reverse-engineered. But more than that, it revealed a systematic campaign of suppression and misinformation that had lasted centuries. The Zarthans had deliberately stunted human technological progress, all while presenting themselves as benevolent overseers to the galaxy at large. "This is monstrous," Lyra whispered, her voice shaking with a mixture of horror and rage. Alex's face was pale, his jaw clenched. "We need to get this information out," he said. "The whole galaxy needs to know the truth." Lyra nodded, her fingers flying over the terminal as she began to download the data. But just as the transfer was nearing completion, a loud alarm blared through the archives. "Security breach in the restricted section," an automated voice announced. "All personnel respond immediately." Lyra's heart raced. "They've detected us. We need to move now." They grabbed the data crystal containing the downloaded information and ran for the exit. But as they reached the main corridor, they found their path blocked by a squad of Zarthan security forces, led by none other than Tarak. "Lady Lyra," Tarak said, his voice cold with anger and disappointment, "step away from the human and surrender yourself. This act of treason ends now." Lyra's mind raced, searching for a way out. She could see no clear escape route, no way to avoid capture. But as she glanced at Alex, seeing the determination in his eyes and feeling the weight of the data crystal in her hand, she knew she couldn't give up. In that moment, Lyra made a decision that would change not just her life, but the course of galactic history. "No, Tarak," she said, her voice steady despite her fear. "This isn't treason. This is justice." With lightning speed, she drew her energy pistol and fired, not at Tarak or his men, but at the ceiling above them. The blast caused a section of the crystalline structure to collapse, temporarily blocking the security team's advance. "Run," Lara shouted to Alex, and together they sprinted down a side corridor. Alarms blazed throughout the building as they ran, the sounds of pursuit growing closer with each passing moment. They weaved through the maze-like structure of the archives, Lara's intimate knowledge of the building giving them a slight edge over their pursuers. Finally, they reached an emergency exit. As they burst out into the cool night air, Lara knew their ordeal was far from over. They had the truth, but now they needed to survive long enough to reveal it to the galaxy. As they disappeared into the shadows of Zarthon Prime, now fugitives from the very society they sought to enlighten, Lara realized that her life as she knew it was over. But in its place, a new purpose had been born, one that could reshape the future of not just the Zarthons and humans, but of all species in the galaxy. The chase was on, and the stakes couldn't be higher. The truth was in their hands, and with it, the power to ignite a revolution that would span the stars. Confrontation and escape. The streets of Zarthon Prime had become a labyrinth of danger for Lyra and Alex. Every shadow concealed a potential threat, every passing hovercar a possible pursuer. The wail of sirens filled the air, growing closer with each passing moment. "We need to get off-world," Alex panted as they ducked into a narrow alley. "If we stay here, they'll find us eventually." Lyra nodded, her mind racing. "The spaceport," she said. "It's our best chance, but security will be tight." They moved through the city with desperate speed, using every trick Lyra knew to avoid detection. Her knowledge of Zarthon Prime's layout proved invaluable, allowing them to use maintenance tunnels and forgotten passages to evade the search parties. As they neared the spaceport, the sound of engines overhead made them freeze. A patrol ship passed low over the buildings, its searchlights sweeping the streets. "They're locking down the city," Lyra whispered. "We're running out of time." They pressed on, finally reaching the outskirts of the spaceport. The normally bustling terminal was eerily quiet, with only security forces visible. "How are we going to get past them?" Alex asked, his voice tense. Lyra's eyes scanned the area, finally settling on a small maintenance hangar near the edge of the spaceport. "There," she said. "If we can get to that hangar, we might find a ship we can use." Using the cover of darkness and the distraction provided by the ongoing search, they managed to slip past the outer security perimeter. As they approached the hangar, however, a figure stepped out of the shadows, blocking their path. Lyra's blood ran cold as she recognized her father, High Commander Vexa. "Lyra," he said, his voice a mixture of anger and sorrow. "What have you done?" For a moment, Lyra was frozen, the weight of her actions crashing down upon her. But then she felt Alex's presence beside her, steadying her, and she found her voice. "What I had to do, Father," she said. "I've discovered the truth about our history, about what we did to the humans. I can't be part of that lie any longer." Vexa's eyes narrowed. "You don't understand the complexities of galactic politics, daughter. Sometimes hard choices must be made for the greater good." "Greater good?" Lyra spat, her anger rising. "Was it for the greater good that we destroyed their fleet? That we stunted their growth for centuries? That we've been lying not just to them, but to our own people?" Vexa took a step forward, his hand outstretched. "Lyra, please, it's not too late. Come back with me. We can fix this." For a brief moment, Lyra wavered. This was her father, the man who had raised her, who had always protected her. But then she remembered the files she had read, the horrific truth of what her people had done. "No, Father," she said, her voice firm. "I won't be part of this anymore. The galaxy deserves to know the truth." Vexa's face hardened. "Then you leave me no choice." He raised his hand, and suddenly they were surrounded by security forces, their weapons trained on Lyra and Alex. But Lyra had anticipated this. In one swift motion, she activated a device on her wrist, a personal shield generator she had borrowed from the archives. A shimmering field of energy enveloped her and Alex. "Now," she shouted, and they made a break for the hangar. Energy blasts ricocheted off their shield as they ran. They could hear Vexos shouting orders, the sound of boots on the ground as the security forces gave chase. They burst into the hangar, quickly scanning the area for a suitable ship. Laura's eyes lit up as she spotted an old scout vessel, small, fast, and perfect for their needs. "There," she pointed. "Can you fly it?" Alex grinned. "Watch me." As they sprinted for the ship, the hangar doors began to close. Laura turned, seeing her father's face contorted with a mixture of rage and desperation. "Lyra," he shouted, "don't do this." But it was too late. They were already inside the ship, Alex's hands flying over the controls as he initiated the launch sequence. The engines rolled to life, and the scout vessel lifted off just as the hangar doors slammed shut. "Hang on," Alex yelled as he pushed the ship to its limits, rocketing out of the atmosphere. Laura clung to her seat, her heart pounding as she watched Zarthon Prime shrink beneath them. Alarms blared as the planetary defense systems activated, trying to lock onto their ship. "They're going to shoot us down," Laura said, her voice tight with fear. Alex's face was a mask of concentration. "Not if I can help it." He pushed the ship into a series of evasive maneuvers, weaving through the defensive grid with a skill that left Lyra breathless. Energy beams lanced past them, missing by mere meters. And then suddenly they were clear. The blackness of space enveloped them, the stars stretching out before them in endless possibility. Laura let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. We did it." Alex nodded, a grim smile on his face. "We're not out of danger yet. They'll be after us. We need to get this information to someone who can use it, someone with the power to make it public." Lyra's mind raced. "The Galactic Council," she said. "If we can present this evidence to them, they'll have to act. It could change everything." As they set course for the nearest Galactic Council outpost, Lyra looked back at the receding form of Zarthon Prime. The only home she had ever known was now forever closed to her. She was an exile, a traitor to her people. But as she clutched the data crystal containing the truth, the key to righting a centuries-old wrong, she knew she had made the right choice. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever dangers they would face, she was ready. The scout ship disappeared into the depths of space, carrying with it a secret that would shake the foundations of the galaxy. Lyra, daughter of the High Commander, and Alex, the human who had shown her the truth, were now at the center of a storm that would reshape history. As the stars streaked by, Lyra allowed herself a moment of hope. The journey ahead would be perilous, but for the first time in her life, she felt truly free. The truth was out there, waiting to be told, and she would see it done, no matter the cost. A new horizon. The journey to the Galactic Council outpost was fraught with tension. Every moment, Lyra and Alex expected to see a Zarthon warship materialize behind them, weapons charged and ready to blast them into oblivion. But as the hours turned into days, it became clear that they had, at least for now, evaded pursuit. During their flight, Lyra and Alex pored over the data they had stolen, uncovering more and more evidence of the Zarthon's centuries-long deception. The depth of the betrayal was staggering, extending far beyond just the humans. Dozens of species had been manipulated, their development stunted or redirected to serve Zarthon interests. How could they do this? Lyra whispered, her voice thick with emotion. How could we claim to be shepherds of the galaxy while committing such atrocities? Alex placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. Power corrupts, he said softly. But what matters now is that we have the truth. We can make it right. As they approached the Galactic Council outpost, a massive space station that served as a neutral ground for interspecies diplomacy, Lyra felt a mix of anticipation and dread. Would they be believed? Or would the Zarthon's influence extend even here? Their arrival caused an immediate stir. The sight of a Zarthon and a human emerging together from a stolen scout ship was enough to raise eyebrows across a dozen species. But when Lyra announced that she had urgent information for the Council, things began to move quickly. Within hours, they found themselves standing before the full Galactic Council, representatives from every major spacefaring race in the known galaxy. The Zarfan representative, an elder named Zorn, looked at Lyra with a mixture of shock and anger. "Esteemed members of the Council," Lyra began, her voice steady despite her nerves. "I come before you today with information that will shake the very foundations of our galactic society." Over the next several hours, Lyra and Alex presented their evidence. They showed the Council the true history of the Zarfan's first contact with humanity, the deliberate suppression of human technology, and the wider pattern of manipulation that had shaped galactic politics for centuries. The reaction was immediate and tumultuous. Some council members expressed outrage, others disbelief. The Zarfan representative, Zorn, attempted to discredit Lyra, painting her as a misguided youth led astray by human lies. But the evidence was irrefutable. As more and more council members examined the data, the truth became undeniable. The Zarfan Empire, long seen as a benevolent guide to the younger races, was revealed as a manipulative force that had shaped the galaxy through deception and force. The deliberations lasted for days. Lyra and Alex were questioned repeatedly, their stories scrutinized from every angle. But in the end, the truth prevailed. The Council's decision was unanimous. The Zarfan Empire would be stripped of its leadership role in galactic affairs. A full investigation would be launched into their past actions, with reparations to be paid to affected species. And perhaps most significantly, a new era of open technological exchange would begin, allowing all races to benefit from each other's advancements. As the Council's decision was announced, Lyra felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She had done it. The truth was out, and the galaxy would never be the same. But her relief was short-lived. As she and Alex left the council chambers, they were confronted by a group of Zarfan officials, led by none other than her father, High Commander Vexa. "Lyra," Vexa said, his voice heavy with emotion, "do you realize what you've done? You've destroyed everything our people have built over millennia." Lyra met her father's gaze, standing tall despite the pain in her heart. "No, father. I've given us a chance to rebuild, to be better than we were, to truly live up to the ideals we claimed to uphold." For a long moment, Vexa said nothing. Then, to Lyra's surprise, he nodded slowly. Perhaps you're right. I've lived with this lie for so long, I'd forgotten the weight of it. But the path ahead will not be easy." "No," Lyra agreed, "but it will be honest, and that's a start." In the days and weeks that followed, the galaxy was in uproar. The revelation of the Zarfan's deception sent shockwaves through every level of society. But amid the chaos, there was also hope. Species that had long been at odds found common ground in their shared history of manipulation. New alliances were forged, old grievances set aside in the face of a new, more open future. Lyra found herself at the center of it all. Her act of defiance had transformed her from the sheltered daughter of a high-ranking official to a symbol of truth and change. It was a role she embraced, working tirelessly to help guide the galaxy through this period of transition. And through it all, Alex remained by her side. Their partnership, born in secrecy and danger, blossomed into something deeper. They became a symbol of what was possible when different species came together in trust and cooperation. Years passed. The galaxy changed. The Zarfan Empire, once the undisputed power in known space, became just one nation among many. Humanity, freed from the shackles of Zarfan suppression, experienced a renaissance of technological and cultural growth. Other species, too, flourished in the new era of openness and exchange. And Lyra, she never returned to Zarfan Prime. Her home was among the stars now, working with the Galactic Council to build a more just and equitable future for all species. She had lost much: her home, her position, her old life, but she had gained so much more. As she stood on the observation deck of a Galactic Council ship, watching the swirl of a newborn nebula, Lyra felt Alex's presence beside her. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked softly. Giving up everything you knew. Laura turned to him, a smile on her face. Not for a moment, she said. We've helped create a better galaxy, a truer one. That's worth any price. As they stood there, watching the birth of new stars, Laura felt a sense of peace wash over her. The path had been hard, the cost high, but the result was a galaxy full of possibility, of hope, of new horizons waiting to be explored. And that, she knew, was a future worth fighting for.